Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ted Gardner, and I'm an interviewer for the Veterans History Project, which is so capably run here at our public library by Dennis Daly, an invaluable service to our nation to have these interviews and to capture the stories that men and women have about a period that is really going glimmering. And today we have the honor and the joy and the pleasure to have Mr. Seth Staples. 450, what?
450th Bomb Group.
450th Bomb Group.
720th.
Wow. 7th Air Force?
720th Bomb. No, it was the 15th Air Force.
15th Air Force.
Wow. Air Corps of the Army.
Yeah.
It was a corps in those days.
Oh my golly.
Then the Jimmy Doolittle was commanding general of the 8th.
Right.
So the Stars and Stripes and all the media would detail where they bombed and
sure.
so forth. And the tagline would be, the 15th also flew. I sort of adopted that.
I'm glad you got in the back door. Well, Seth, it's wonderful to have you here, and we're going to just talk a couple of new friends here and find out about you and get you on the record, because you get a DVD from this interview, which will be nice for the family.
Yes, it will.
And so forth and so on. Where were you born, Seth?
Town called Butler, Pennsylvania. Armco Steel, which is now AK Steel,
yes, sure.
has a plant there, and
Sure.
was sort of the backbone of the steel town, one of those steel towns in western Pennsylvania.
Oh my gosh, old Butler in the olden days must have been a pretty smoky city.
Yeah, yeah. But if you were going to college, and it was a wonderful place to work in the summer. You made great wages, and
Sure.
and they were a very, very responsible corporate citizen. They did a lot for Butler.
What about your family? Do you have brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I was one of 6 children, one of 7 actually, but one died very young. And I had 3 sisters and 2 brothers, and I have 1 sister left, and she's 93.
Isn't that something? My goodness. What year were you born?
1923.
23, so you're 87.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now, being raised in that sort of an environment, of course, there was a lot of pride, wasn't there, in that industry, the workers and so forth.
Yeah.
And that would be inculcated in a young fellow like you. You went to elementary school there in Butler?
Elementary school, high school, yeah, Butler, PA.
Well, I'll be darned.
And then
What through high school, for example, now, let's see, you were 80, 87. Well, you knew what was going on in the world.
I graduated in 41.
41, okay.
And I was in the lower third of my high school class, I think. But state senators had scholarships going begging. I got to go to the University of Pennsylvania on a full scholarship. I wasn't an athlete. I was a very poor, but they didn't know what to do with a scholarship.
They had it, and here, you can have it.
Yeah.
Well, isn't that great?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, well, that's very interesting. Now, before we get into that college period, what in high school did you play athletics or?
Well, I tried.
Had hobbies?
I was very bad at it. I had an older brother who was really, really good athlete, and they remembered him. And I was slow and skinny, and actually had hay fever and asthma. I tried to play football.
Oh my gosh.
And I compared very unfavorably, but I did. I played,
Sure.
Y basketball
Oh, yeah.
and
Yeah.
some football, and I've always been a sports
Now,
fan.
did you live right in the town or
Yeah.
outside? Okay.
Well, we lived right in the town,
in the
walked to
town?
school, yeah.
Your father was a oh no, he worked in the steel mill.
No, my father actually was a pharmacist who had gone into the insurance business and went belly up in the Depression,
Oh, golly.
covered some people's
Yeah,
premiums, I think, and got in big trouble doing that.
right.
But, and he had, this was at 55 years old, and he did go to work at Pullman Standard Steel Company as a first aid guy in the evening. And then he sold industrial paints. But I've often thought if I'd have gone broke at 55, I don't know if I could have handled that.
I know, isn't that, what a tough time in life to have that
So
happen.
he's something of a hero to me that he,
Well, I should say so. And having a rousing family like you had too,
yeah,
that really kept him and your mother hopping, I'm sure.
yeah.
Well, now, so here you were approaching the end of your high school career, and the guy says you can go to UPA, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
What a deal!
I had a banker had a half scholarship at Allegheny College, which is a small college up in Meadville. So I had my choice, and they thought the University of Pennsylvania. Well, my brother, the star athlete, talked me into taking chemical engineering, and I was the only kid that didn't know how to use a slide rule. They were all going, and I was doing paid.
Right.
So I quickly found my way into the College of Arts and Sciences,
Oh, good for
to
you.
the mutual relief of the engineering department and myself.
I'm sure. Yeah, we've all had those problems. I know I didn't do very well in chemistry. But in those days, so, you know, you were in the big city of Philly,
Yes.
and
yes.
Pennsylvania generally regarded as an Ivy League school.
Yeah.
And very prestigious. Did you enjoy college?
I was out of my league, but I got adopted by a guy, became his roommate, and he sort of greased the skids for me. As a matter of fact, I got into a fairly good fraternity because he wouldn't pledge unless I would.
Oh,
And it was a close thing. They were ready to reject him on the basis of, but yeah, I didn't. I enjoyed it. I was out of my element, but I was there for a year and a half, and then enlisted.
right.
And after the war, I had a lot more confidence in myself. I'm not hero material, but I was something of a survivor. And
Well, of course.
I found out I could function through fear.
What led you into the Air Corps?
Selfishness, I think. I didn't want to slog along as an infantryman, and
Right. Yeah.
the Air Corps sounded fairly glamorous, so I enlisted in the Air Corps.
Where did they send you for primary?
They sent me, the first place I went was Miami Beach. That was for basic training. And that was in February. And I remember that we drilled on, we ruined some golf course, I know, because we drilled on the fairways, I think. We were, they stripped these hotels, you know, and they put in bunks and stuff like that, but we did stay in hotels. But they managed to run them like army places.
Right.
And
Well, now that was still the Air Corps, or had they changed?
no, that
to
was
Air
the whole way through World War II. That was the Air Corps.
It was.
The Air Force didn't emerge, I think, until maybe the 50s. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, so how long were you there in Miami?
Well, Miami about 6 weeks, then I went to Kent State because they were backed up. Went there for kind of a pre-thing and got about 8 hours of dual instruction of Piper Cub, and I wasn't very good at that. And then we went to San Antonio, Texas for, that was where you got classified.
Sure.
And all the good guys got classified as pilots, and people like me got classified as navigators because we didn't have probably the requisite coordination or whatever. And I subsequently washed out of navigation because I don't add particularly well. And the poor instructor, I think it was the first guy I'd ever, they even said, well, if we watched you back for 3 weeks, do you think then? And I said, I don't think I'd ever become a navigator. And they said, well, okay, we agreed. So I became a gunner. I went through gunnery training at Harlingen, Texas. I was in Texas for about 16 months, the only place in my life I ever had boils. I had terrible boils. They were sore. Then I left Texas, and then I kept asking Army doctors why, and they said, we don't know why. Maybe it's the water, who knows? But I was at Ellington Field, too, in Houston in the summer.
Yeah, I've
No
heard
air conditioning, a barracks, and oh, man.
boiling.
We threw talc all over us. So it was, Houston is, wow. That was hot.
Yeah, I've heard of Ellington.
Ellington Field, yeah.
Pretty important place.
Yeah.
Well, now, in your gunnery training, of course, you had, what, 50 caliber? And
Caliber 50 machine guns. Yeah, you were supposed to be able to field strip one of those suckers blindfolded and put it back together. I don't know if I ever managed that, but they needed cannon fodder, so they were. And when we got to our 450th, you know, we'd gone through all this how you repair, and the flight commander said, "If your gun's jammed, get out of that turret. Don't fool around with it." Okay.
yeah, very simple. Now, what kind of planes were you a gunner in?
B-24.
24s?
Yeah.
Okay, boy.
Liberator bombers. Yes.
Big consolidated. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that was a huge.
They had a Martin turret. I understand the B-17, the guy laid there and handheld his guns. We had a turret, Martin turret.
Mm-hmm. Was that a top turret or
Well, it was
belly turret?
It was the rear. You know,
Okay.
it was the tail.
Yeah.
The end of it.
Well, that and I'm sure that training must have been pretty darn intense, because you were filling a very important position on that
Well,
on that aircraft. But did you get a stripe when you got out of there, PFC, or were you
we were
corporal? Or?
yeah, corporal.
Mm-hmm.
I presented myself when we were shot down as a sergeant,
Mm-hmm.
because the Germans worked corporals, but they were very conscious of rank.
Oh yeah.
And if you were a sergeant, they didn't work you. So,
Yeah. Right.
and actually, I did make buck sergeant, but I went down so quickly. My rank hadn't caught up with me.
Did you have to parachute out?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, it was going into Munich in July 19th of 1944. And we had turned on to the initial point. We're on the bomb run. We had, ironically, we were flying, usually you fly a 10-man crew. We had 11th man because we had a a plane that was specially equipped to jam the anti-aircraft guns. We had a guy operating that equipment. Well, evidently it attracted the anti-aircraft gun because we were hit on, and we were on the bomb run, and
This is over Germany?
this was Munich.
Munich.
Going into Munich. And I heard the pilot say to the co-pilot, keep it in tight, we want to get a good bomb pattern, which is the last thing I assume he ever said, because we got hit, bang, 2 in a row, and the plane started down, and the ball gunner came back to help me because I got my foot caught in the turret, and helped me. I was sitting on my chute. You didn't wear a chute because there wasn't room. So I had to put the chute on, which I put on backwards. Turned out I had to pull it left instead of right. And this thing, he got out. He said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah." And he went out the bottom. Well, the plane lurched, and I got thrown up against the bulkhead. And when I came to, that escape hatch was closed, and I had to go up in the window. That's supposed to cut you in half when you do that, but evidently I was on the outside of the spin or something. I did everything wrong, everything possible you could do, and I got out. And,
well,
I was so inept you wouldn't believe it. But anyway, I did get out, and 5 guys did not. I think they probably were killed right away. 6 of us got out.
What was the complement of a B-24?
Well, there was a pilot and a co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, top gunner, nose gunner, 2 waist gunners, and a tail gunner.
Right.
And a ball gunner.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the one that helped me get out, and helped the radio operator get out.
Gosh, that was lucky, wasn't it?
Yeah, he should have been given a medal. I never put him. I did. My memory was so bad that I felt guilty I didn't help him until I ran into him at Christmas, or in the prison camp, and found out in fact he had helped me. And then it came back to me that he really had.
So you were fluttering down there in your backside parachute.
Yeah.
Did you hit the ground pretty hard?
But yeah, I had time to look up and see that plane going down and look around.
Oh my God!
I had ridden that thing down fairly far.
Yes.
I was very, very, very lucky to get out of there.
My goodness, yes, because
I
you
hit
say you were knocked out.
temporarily. Yeah. And the guy got out ahead of me was singed some, but I wasn't. It wasn't on fire, but I was, crap on wood, I wasn't, but I hit the ground, and there were a couple of home guards there. I didn't even have time to hardly get the chute, and they were on me, and
Right on you.
that was the end of that.
They turned you over to the
Yeah,
Wehrmacht.
yeah.
Golly. Well, now, what, this was near Munich that this happened?
This was near Munich, yeah. This was, I was in a little village, but I can't tell you. It was outside Munich. We never made it into the, I assume the initial point was about 10 miles outside. We were just had got on the bomb run when we were hit, so.
Now, you were captured, and then what did they do with you?
Well, we went to a central point. The officers went to different camps and the enlisted men, and we were sorted out there. And this is, I don't know whether this is relevant, but there was a church service on a Sunday there, open air, And a young Royal Air Force pilot gave this sermon, and he said, you know, you're probably wondering why you're alive and your buddies are dead. And he said, I don't have an answer for that, but you might try to live for them.
Wow.
Which was a very powerful, you know, and
How true.
in the 60-odd years, I really haven't lived for them, but at the time, it was a powerful thing to say.
Well, yeah,
And,
but your spirit and everything has certainly meant a lot.
But in any event, we were assigned to Stalag Luft 4, which was up in the Pomeranian corridor, but halfway between Danzig and Stettin, and a place that I can't pronounce.
Oh, way up north. Yeah.
Way up north.
Yeah.
And on February 6th of 45, the Russians were coming from the east, and they marched us in the dead of winter for 2.5 months till April 26th.
Good heavens.
So that the Russians wouldn't get credit for liberating us.
Sure.
So we spent 2.5 months, and
That must have been a grueling
it
experience.
was. It was.
Did you have adequate food?
No. I wound up weighing about 90 pounds.
Is that so?
And I'd gone in weighing about probably 165.
Mm-hmm.
We were liberated at a little place called Bitterfeld by the 104th Division, the Timberwolves outfit, and some small river. I always thought it was the Oder or the Moselle. I don't think it was. And they were very kind to us. But that we went through the night before. We went through the lines in the forest. It was eerie because they said, stay in line, don't deviate, and don't make any noise.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd hear a thing go click, and you'd think, oh my God, they're going to shoot
They're
us.
going to shoot you.
Maybe it was a guy lighting a cigarette. I don't know.
Oh, gee.
But then the next day, because we had been going in circles, and finally one of our guys said to the Germans, if we're not heading west from now on, I'm going to get you for criminal, you know. And so we went west and walked into the lines, and the last few days, the German civilians, you know, they were cheering us, and we were saying, but we're the Luft gangsters, we're the terror bombers. They said, oh, because they didn't want the Russians. They figured, oh man, we don't want, and they wanted to be, evidently Eisenhower and I've read since that they made an agreement that they would stop at this particular river, and the Russians could have the rest of it. And boy, the Germans were sick, and the guards wanted to come across with us.
Sure.
And we said, or the 104th Division wouldn't accept them. Said, no, we don't want you as prisoners. Stay there.
Well, I've read a little bit about that. I didn't serve in the ETO, but I've read a little bit about the conflict that the Russians caused, you know, because of course, you know, you got to realize they lost,
oh my God,
500,000 soldiers, you know, dead.
Yeah.
Not even counting the wounded.
Yeah.
And they were bitter people.
We heard, now this may be an apocryphal story, that they came into Bart's where the officers were and said, you know, come on out and you can pillage and rape.
Yeah.
And they said, we don't do that. They said, what are you kidding?
Yeah.
You know, that's what you
they
do.
did. Oh my golly, oh gosh. Yeah. Well, those terrible battles between the Nazis and the Soviets, Stalingrad and Moscow.
Yes. God, yes. And when Stalin wasn't sabotaging his own troops.
Right, yeah. Oh, he was a beast. There was
Yeah.
no question about it. Well, can you think of any humorous incidents that took place? How long were you incarcerated?
Well, I was shot down about 9 months. We got to the camp probably first of August and stayed there till, the end of January, 1st of February, and then we were at those 2.5 months we were on the road. And when we were lucky, we'd sleep in barns. When we weren't lucky, we slept in open field.
Out in the open, my goodness. Snow and mud.
Yeah, and at one point we were near Peenemünde, was where the rockets were, and at night, the British just area bombed at night. They frankly didn't have they had area targets. They didn't, and we were in that area, and that was hairy. There was also, I'm not sure, I think it was Wittenberg where we got strafed. And I always, I jumped into a graveyard to get in between. And I often wondered if that was Luther's church that the 95 Theses.
Well, you're right, out the door.
But I don't know that. I
I'll be
don't know
darned.
that I even have the right town, but I think it was Wittenberg.
I'll be darned. Yeah, Wittenberg. That is. Because that's the name of the college in Springfield,
Yeah.
Wittenberg College after Luther.
Matter of fact, I got my master's in sacred theology from Wittenberg. The seminary isn't there anymore. It's at Capitol, but it was at Wittenberg at the time.
So you have a master's in sacred?
Yeah, I got my that's my master's in sacred. Now they call what the first degree a master's, Master of Divinity.
Yeah.
And then the next, I was going to go for maybe a doctorate, which was the long way. Not a PhD, but a THD. That's really a long way. And that's the only, I got the master's there at Hama. And that was the year I left the ministry and went to work in the city, 1971.
Well, be darned.
Yeah.
Going back to your 9 months there at Stalag 4, of course, I know, read enough stories about it, but I know that they treated the enlisted men.
Well, they weren't the Japanese, thank heaven, but there was one time when we got off the train, the Red Cross had given us some clothes and it was in a parcel, just like a suitcase. Remember, I don't know if you remember this, but when I was in college, I used to send my dirty clothes home.
Send them home and Mom send them back.
Right.
Sure.
Well, it was in that kind of a container.
Oh, yeah. Kind of a canvas.
And they ran us up the 2 or 3 miles from and they had dogs and bayonets, and I fell over a guy and let go of my parcel, and then they stopped on it. They were after those parcels.
Sure.
And so there was that little bit of brutality. But the camp itself, it was, boredom was your main thing. And I've always had great respect for the Red Cross. And when we got Red Cross parcels, we did all right. But we never got a full parcel. But we got some, and cigarettes were in there. We played bridge for cigarettes. That was, and if you were a smoker, we played pretty serious bridge.
You bet.
But when we got on the road and we were trading cigarettes for bread and I got an object lesson. The British prisoners formed themselves into groups of 25, 50, and they had people negotiate for them. And so their prices remained fairly stable. Not the Americans, you know, every man for himself. Well, we were cutting our cigarettes in half, those of us who smoked, and trying to stay. And you'd be standing next to a guy who didn't smoke. And you'd say, I'll give you 2 cigarettes for that. And he'd say, I'll give you 3. Our prices went out of sight.
Of course.
So in certain circumstances, it's every man for himself.
Absolutely.
Philosophy that we have as Americans doesn't always work. But
Well, did you, of course, you made friends in camp,
yeah,
people you'd never seen before.
yeah, we did. And you paired up. In camp, the guy I shared rations with, you paired off and you shared rations. A guy by the name of Mort Warno, whose uncle was Mark Warno. Do you remember the Lucky Strike hit parade?
Of course.
Well, that was his uncle, Mark Warno. And Mort, of course, was Jewish.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the Jewish guys, and it took an awful lot of courage for these guys to fly against the Germans, but they had P on their dog tags, okay, for Protestant.
Sure.
But Mort Warno was one of the most ethical people I ever ran into.
Is that so?
And we shared rations. He was very careful that it would be equal. And then I'd say, Mort, you choose. And these guys said, you are so rotten, because he'd always give me the biggest part.
Well, that must have been a very nice experience.
It was.
Did he last long?
I think that he became, I tried to look him up, I think he became a teacher of children with disabilities. I think so. But we got separated in the march.
Oh.
And I don't know who he got with. And I paired off with a guy who got separated from his regular guy, a guy by the name of Hap Marston. And so we shared rations on the road, walked together on the road. And he became a successful coal miner. Thank God he didn't strip mine. He was a deep miner in West Virginia. And he had been a foreman with one of the big companies, and they went out of business or whatever. And anyway, he owned a couple of mines. We were up, I visited him, and he flew all the time. And we were flying on a cloudy day, and he said, I think I can get in there. I want to show you that mine. And I said, maybe another day, Hap. Well, he said to me, I fly so much, but I think I'm going to get killed. And by gosh, he had bought a helicopter, and one winter he was dropping bales of hay to cattle, and he backed into high tension lines, and he was killed. But he had a stream running through his living room. He was really
My goodness.
What an interesting the end of his life, he did very, very well.
Yes, I should say.
But I don't know if you're familiar with this, but during the Depression, Eleanor Roosevelt had miners. There was she had an outfit, you know, she didn't do it herself, but she inspired people to build these houses, pretty substantial frame houses with what do you call them, cold storage, underground cold storage, you know.
Yeah.
And that was during the Depression, and I visited him in the 50s or 60s. And those houses were still there. It was sort of a model village that she had, she took the miners under her wing, so
Oh,
to
yeah,
speak.
those Depression days,
Yeah.
particularly in West
Yeah,
Virginia,
yeah.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Oh, terrible time.
But at the end, he had his own hangar. He taxied up to the little airport, taxied
How
back
about
to his
that? What a
own
guy.
hangar.
What a guy.
Yeah.
Did you ever do any flying yourself?
No, no.
Never any private flying?
No, those 8 hours I had, they never let you solo. But my final check ride, the guy that was a regular instructor, I would go up on Sunday, he'd say, oh, you don't, he said, we'd fool around, he'd chase ducks and things like that. So I went up with the final check ride, you had a different guy. And a woman instructor came down, it was beginning to sock in. And a woman instructor said, it's not worth fun. I can fly anything. So he takes me up, and all of a sudden, the engine quits. He said, what'd you chop the engine for? I said, I didn't chop the engine.
Good.
He said, oh my God, did you check the gas? I said, I don't even know how to check the gas. He said, oh, let me have the controls.
Ran out of fuel. Oh my gosh.
He came in a farmer's field, and I found out you're supposed to do it this way. So he came in, crossed, and we nosed up, and we got out. And the owner of the airport came up, picked me up, and the guy said, how about me? He said, you flew it in there, you fly it out. So guess what mark I got on my final check ride?
Oh my goodness sakes. Well, you know, there's stories like that, Seth, that we all have had some experience with, and wherever we were, and it's that kind of thing that your family appreciate hearing from you. Have you written memoirs, or did you keep a diary?
I as a matter of fact, I have. I'm toward the end of it, and nobody's going to see this but my kids, because the memoirs are not that, well written or that memorable. But I've always felt my children never really understood me, nor I them, I guess. And so I wanted to try to explain myself to them.
Of course.
And so I have written.
Well, good for you.
Memoirs, but I'm not. I'm just at the end of my time with what is now the Jobs and Family Service. And then I went back and did interim ministries for another dozen years or so, which was a very satisfactory experience.
Well, that's interesting, because of course, the transition from the military and then readjusting back into civilian.
Yeah. Well, the last years of college, I did a fair amount of drinking, I have to admit, along with a number of veterans that came back.
Oh, that was very common.
And
very common.
One guy who'd been in the 10th Mountain Division had an ulcer and kept drinking to alleviate the pain.
Oh, making it worse. Oh my goodness.
But a lot of us drank a lot.
Yeah.
And but I wound up something of a pacifist, because this may be your experience. I figured nothing is worth war is. Nothing is worth war,
Oh, absolutely.
And it makes monsters of us. As a matter of fact, I don't know whether it's even wise to say this, but there was one time we went through a village, and we were hungry, and I saw a little girl come out of a bakery with a couple of loaves of bread. And I knew I could have killed her for that bread.
Yeah.
And maybe that would have been a bonus, And it wasn't decency that kept me from that, it was an armed guard. But what I'm saying is that it can turn you into a monster.
Yes,
And,
that's very true.
I
Very
think
true.
civilians, you
But
know,
I
they always
think-
want it.
I think you've expressed it so well, though, Seth, that being a man of God,
Well,
you know.
I went into the church thinking the church was the community that, you know, could be an ameliorating force.
Yes.
But there were a lot of things about the church that disillusioned me. that was,
Oh, brother.
but that wasn't the church's fault. I had expectations that were unrealistic. I happen to go now to, I happen to attend a Quaker meeting, silent
You?
Quaker meeting. And they are thoroughgoing pacifists.
Wow.
I'm not a thoroughgoing pacifist because I'm not so sure that that's always the answer.
Well, it is. You're right. It is. There are two sides to that question,
Yeah.
very much. And of course, one of the things that I've always told my family and speaking to school children and so forth, and somebody will say, well, war is terrible, and you know we got to get rid of war, and so forth and so on. And I said, well, now just stop and think about it for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
As long as mankind is on this mortal coil, there's going to be war.
Yeah.
Because if there are more than two people, or two people only, they're going to fight.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that can be done about it. It's inherent in the human spirit.
Unhappily,
whatever.
that's true.
Yeah. Well,
But mutual terror has kept us for how many decades now, since we've had the nuclear
yes.
capability. So, but there's still war.
Well, that's true. You know, right now as we
Yeah.
speak, there are something like 37 to 38 wars going on around the world. Not just not just Afghanistan or Kuwait,
Yeah.
you know. But well, back to your, you know, that march that you did, 2.5 months.
Yeah.
Good gravy, that must have been what, 150 miles or so?
Oh, it's been estimated because we did different 500 to 800 miles.
No
Now,
kidding.
Yeah, this wasn't, there was about 3 days of this that they put us in cattle cars, and we'd have rather been walking because we knew that anything that moved was being strafed. But we were in different little units, let's say, I don't know, a couple hundred guys to a unit, and we went different places. That's why and some ran into prisoner of war camps and stayed there. We did once in the lousy French who had American parcels wouldn't give us any. But we had to keep going. In any event, it's been estimated 500 to 800 miles.
Gracious.
And it was in what's also been estimated as the coldest German winter in 50 years.
Oh yeah.
It
44,
was,
45.
it was, man.
Oh my
It was
goodness.
cold
My
and
goodness.
no food. It was, but I really, you know, it wasn't the Bataan Death March. I'm not personally, I don't know that anybody perished. I don't know that they didn't, but I don't have knowledge of anybody dropped. What they did do, what the Germans did do, is you couldn't walk. They had carts.
They did.
Yeah.
They would put you on.
Yeah, and it so happened
Right.
we could walk, but I was in the slow group for a while because Hap had a bad knee.
How about your equipment? I mean, your clothing. Did you have good boots? And so forth?
It so happened that I had good Army shoes, and boy, you didn't take those off. One guy took his off and tied him around his neck. He almost got hung on him because the guy came and he was going to steal them.
Sure. Oh, gee. Oh.
But you just, I happened to have good standard issue
Did you have any contact with the Third Army on the ground?
Patton's third, unless the 104th Division was part of that, and it may have been. They were so kind to us. But what happened to me was that they said, now don't eat too much. Well, that fell on deaf ears. So I got so cramped up that they sent me to the hospital in Paris. This is a story of my life. I'm in the hospital in Paris on VE Day. VE Day. I'm only there for malnutrition, all right? I tried to bribe MPs. They're celebrating all over Paris. People are being,
and here
I
you
can't
are
get
in
out
bed.
of the hospital. I wasn't even in bed. I couldn't get out. I observed this. from
Oh my
window.
golly! Oh, you could have been living it up.
Oh, there was a guy in there who was an orderly who had the flu. And he was sick because this was the final days of war. And he'd been stealing sheets. And he was selling them for booze, scotch and other things, to dressmakers in Paris, okay? He'd bring back the booze to the officers. He was making money. And he hated to be sick because he was losing all this money.
Gosh. Yankee ingenuity,
Yeah.
huh? Oh,
It was the end of the war, and he could just see all his profit going out.
I know. And you could hear all that joy and excitement outside, and
Yes.
you couldn't partake.
I couldn't.
Well, of course, the attitude among the as the war was winding down, everyone was so excited to get home.
Yeah.
Have I got enough points? You know, blah
Yeah.
blah blah.
Yeah.
How did that work out for you?
Well, when I got in Camp Chesterfield, and a guard had given me his Mauser rifle, and I was going to bring that home as a deer rifle for my dad. And I walked all over the place with that thing hitting my head, hitting my knees. And I got to Camp Chesterfield, and I got halfway to my tent, and I put it down for a while, and somebody stole it. But anyway, there I got yellow jaundice, and so I was delayed. And when I got back, I was 2 points, I think, short of discharge. And they assigned me to a rescue boat maintenance outfit outside the Newark airport. These guys had spent the entire war on, is it the Hudson River? They seldom got out on the river. On the off chance that some plane would dump itself. They were there to rescue them.
They were there to rescue, just waiting for something to happen. Oh gosh, yeah.
They used to shoot wharf rats. But anyway, that was my final assignment. They made me supply sergeant, and I gave away so much stuff, including, it turns out, condoms. And the guy came to me and said, these guys would have to have a dozen women a night to live up. And I said, I'm not questioning them if they wanted to. So I gave away so much stuff, they gave me mail clerk, I think. And I spent the last weeks in that outfit. And then I got discharged, but it was too late for for this fall semester. I went back the winter semester. Worked in the mill in the meantime. And
How did you get back and forth across the state? That's a long state. from West?
Oh, by train?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I went
You
by
didn't have
train.
a car of your own?
No. You know, I went by train from Pittsburgh to Philadelphia.
Sure. How about coming from France back to
We were
the
on
States?
a Liberty ship, and they said it was about, I think, what, a 10-day trip or something. I think they said they put a band around it so that the back end would get there the same time. That's another place I outsmarted myself. I decided I didn't want to do KP, so I volunteered to take care of somebody in sick bay. Well, this guy was in better shape than I was. I regretted that decision. I always outsmarted myself. I was busier there than I'd ever been at KP.
I'll be darned. Well, now back to college, and then you graduated.
Graduated.
Class of what?
1948.
Oh, yeah.
Original 1945.
Right.
1948. Yeah.
And you hadn't met the love of your life yet?
No. I went to work for Pittsburgh Plate Glass Company for a year up in the Finger Lakes region.
Oh, yeah.
Out of the Rochester warehouse.
Sure.
It's
Cornell,
beautiful. Yeah.
Lake Cayuga.
Yes.
That sort of stuff.
Yeah. I called on.
Beautiful country.
Beautiful country. I hated to stop and call on the customers, but then I went to seminary. I was at. I made the decision to go. My family would go to Chautauqua. You ever heard of Chautauqua?
Oh yeah, sure.
They go up there.
Near Jamestown.
Yeah. And I that summer I stayed and I worked in a diner as a dishwasher, and but I wound up at I was Presbyterian at the time, and Union didn't have. I thought I was going to go to Union in New York, and they didn't have room, and I went to this tiny seminary in New Jersey. It was a terrible, terrible, terrible year. And I went back over to Union, and they said, well, we don't like to take people from, I said, it's either that or I'm not going back there. So they took me, and these names I'm sure mean nothing, but Reinhold Niebuhr and Paul Tillich were on that faculty at the same time. And they were the most outstanding Protestant theologians.
Right.
And that isn't just my opinion.
Yeah.
It was a marvelous faculty. And Reinhold Niebuhr in the orientation said, he said, some of you are here because you're going to go into the academic world. Some of you are here because you know you're going into ministry. He said, some of you are not sure why you're here and you're exploring. He said, to you I'd like to speak, because that was my attitude.
Isn't
and
that
I
so?
thought, oh man, I'm home.
That great man.
Yeah, but you know, that was where I was.
Sure.
I didn't know why that, you know.
Right.
I had this vague idea that the church was this great community that would be an ameliorating force in this world.
Yes.
But that's about as far as I got. And it was to have somebody, you know, Niebuhr never had a PhD.
I didn't know that.
They, when they hired him at Union, when Henry Sloane Coffin hired him, there was, you know, there was a lot of snobbishness going on.
Sure.
Why would you hire this? Because he was a pastor out of Detroit, and he didn't have a PhD. But he was a brilliant, brilliant theologian.
Brilliant man. Well, the experience that you
It's all done.
had in those days, and then were you, when you finished and got your degree at seminary, you got a seminarian's degree, didn't you? Did you go right into a pastorship?
Yeah, I went in a little church in Elmira, New York, because I had done my thesis on the worker priests of France. So I wanted to support myself. I was a bachelor. And and I was in Chappaqua doing, I did field work in East Harlem. And my in with the kids was I was teaching them basketball. Well, one of the Peg Eddie, who's from Cincinnati, said, well, we don't want you to be close to the kids on that basis, you know. And anyway, the last 6 months I said, give me the Mink and Martini set. Because I'd been in, so I went out to Chappaqua, where that great friend of the poor, Bill Clinton bought. Yeah.
Giving away your money and mine.
So that was a congregational church, and the guy wanted me to come as an assistant, and I said, you know, I was wearing a hair shirt. You can be so self-righteous when you're young. I said, I don't want to be in a place where people, you know, go into New York and back and ignore, you know. So he said, well, if you're going to wear this hair shirt. So the superintendent of the New York thing said, well, there's this church in Elmira. They're going to go down the tubes anyway. You're not going to, you know, you're not going to do them any harm. If that's what, that was my ringing endorsement.
Wow.
You're not going to do them any harm. So I went up and my terms were, I wouldn't take any money, but I would do the things that I was trained to do, and they could do the rest of the work. Well, I found out that that didn't matter. If you were the minister, you were supposed to, you know, do all kinds of things. But
you're supposed to be all things to
yeah,
all people.
yeah. But I did try that, and then I went to Columbus. But yes, my first two churches, I was a bachelor, and people were looking at me sideways, sort of.
Oh yeah, sure. And then you started a family.
Yeah, and we went to Kent State as the campus minister before it was famous. That's where I became somewhat cynical about the protest movement in the Vietnam War, because I was there in the early 60s, and the college kids couldn't care less about that war. They couldn't, every poor kid and every black kid in this country could have been shot up. When the draft came along, all of a sudden this was an unholy war. This was the basis of their protest. They didn't protest it if it didn't affect them. So I was, there was a lot to protest about the Vietnam War.
Oh yes.
But the college students piece of it, I felt was pure selfishness.
Well, it was a crazy mixed up time, and the attitude of the nation was changing and everything.
Well, it was in the, I was always ambivalent about it. It was in the context of the Cold War, and there was no doubt that communism was on the ascent.
On the march
at the time, and they were being very militant about it. So whether this was the best way to stop them or not, I don't know. But it sure had a whole lot more reason to be than the adventure in Iraq, in my opinion.
Well, you certainly have, it's obvious that you've given so much of your life to good deeds and trying hard and so forth. And your wonderful sense of humor, which has carried you and supported you pretty darn well, I would say, throughout your life. And you have children?
Yes, 2 children, a boy and a girl. The nuclear family.
The nuclear family. Yeah, we're all familiar with that. Well, honestly, it's just, I wish we had more time. And that's the way it is with these interviews. There are those such as yours that are so good and so rich, what you've imparted to us and what you expressed, that we wish we had more time to extend them. But as I said, you'll get a DVD of this, and that your family and your your descendants will always have something to look back
Thank you.
and see that about you. We thank you very much,
Thank
Seth,
you.
for
Thank
your
you.
graciousness and
Thank you.
wish you well and good health. And where do you live?
Thank you for the opportunity.